Abandoned by my children in my darkest hour, an incredible help came from an unexpected source. George sat alone in his quiet, empty house, the silence pressing in like a heavy weight. Memories filled the walls, echoes of laughter and warmth from gatherings long gone. The autumn chill seeped through the windows, reminding him of cold nights spent around the fire, but now, only the crackling embers of his memories remained. He felt like a relic of another life, one where his children played and filled the rooms with joy. But as the years rolled by, they drifted away, leaving an ache in his chest that grew heavier with each passing day. This particular morning, he rose slowly, a weariness that seeped into his bones. He had always been a strong man, a Vietnam veteran who once bore the weight of his country's burdens, but now he struggled to lift a spoonful of oatmeal to his lips. Then, suddenly, the world faded. The floor rushed up to meet him, and darkness wrapped around him like a cold, suffocating shroud. When George opened his eyes, he was in the hospital, under stark fluorescent lights, surrounded by the hustle of nurses and doctors. It was a whirlwind of activity, all too jarring for a man who had grown accustomed to the steady cadence of solitude. His heart raced as he tried to comprehend what had happened. That's when Sarah appeared. With her warm smile and gentle hands, she brought a softness to the harsh reality of the hospital room. "You're going to be okay," she assured him, her voice a soothing balm to his frayed nerves. As she attended to him, George felt something awaken within him, a fragile hope. Over the following days, they exchanged stories. He spoke of his family, his sacrifices, and the weight of loneliness. Sarah, in her soft-spoken manner, opened up about her struggles too, revealing her own scars. They bonded over shared pain and resilience, filling the silence around George with laughter and sincerity, yet lurking in the corners of his mind was the looming shadow of his hospital bill. One afternoon, Sarah's manager delivered the grim news: George may be discharged prematurely due to lack of funds. His heart sank as he weighed the options, each more daunting than the last. Desperate, he reached out to his children, expecting them to come running to his aid. Their terse replies broke him further, revealing just how distant they had become. "I'm sorry, Dad, we're just so busy," one text read, like a dagger piercing his heart. The feeling of betrayal churned in his gut. He had fought for them, bled for them. How could they be so indifferent in his time of need? And then, in a moment of raw honesty, George confronted them. It was a painful exchange, a clash of hurt and longing, as years of missed connections came crashing down. "You promised to be there," he shouted, tears spilling from his eyes. They responded with defensiveness and guilt, unearthing the depths of their family's fractures. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As George sat in despair, he felt the stirrings of the community he had once served. News of his plight spread like wildfire, igniting a spark in the townsfolk. Neighbors began to rally, bringing food, offering assistance, and sharing their stories of courage. Sarah stood beside him, her unwavering support shining as a beacon of hope in the darkness. With every small act of kindness, George grasped a powerful truth: family isn't always about blood, sometimes, it's about the hearts that choose to stand by you. But in the depths of his mind lingered unresolved tensions, leaving him torn between the past and a renewed sense of family forged in the present. Would he find a way to heal the bonds with his children? Or would he forge a new path rooted in the love and support of those who truly saw him? As George lingered on the brink of transformation, the weight of his solitude began to lift, yet shadows of ache still lingered, leaving readers eager to uncover the next chapter of his journey. George lay in the hospital bed, absorbing the kindness that surrounded him like a quilt of warmth. He watched as people from his neighborhood came in wave after wave, their faces a mixture of concern and compassion. Each visit reminded him of the ties he once took for granted, ties that had since frayed and broken. A woman named Mrs. Henderson brought him home-baked cookies while her husband chatted about old times, illuminating memories George thought were long buried. "That's the best lemonade in town," a neighbor named Tom boasted, handing him a bottle filled with bright yellow liquid. "You need some sweetness in your life, George." Laughter mingled with the scent of the fresh cookies, filling the sterile hospital room with warmth. For a moment, George felt cherished, yet the cracks of his family connections surged into his thoughts. Those empty chairs at the family table were reminders of what had been lost. He glanced at his phone, its screen lighting up with more distant messages from his children. Each text felt like a sting, a reminder of absence more than love. It was disheartening. "I just don't understand," George murmured under his breath, a quiet frustration overtaking him. He closed his eyes, trying to push real questions from his mind, yet they pricked at him like thorns. Why wouldn't they come? Why wouldn't they fight through their busyness to lend him a hand? Sarah had been through it all with him. Their late-night talks turned into healing moments, where vulnerability sparkled between them, igniting a companionship forged through struggles. This unexpected friendship filled cracks he thought were permanent, causing him to rethink his understanding of family. Not only blood but those willing to stand beside you mattered. She sat by his side one evening, flipping through a magazine, her face bathed in the soft glow from the lamp overhead. "You know, George," she said gently, "you deserve to let people in. It's okay to need help. It doesn't make you weak." She was right. George realized he had always been a provider, a protector, and it felt foreign to open up and let others see him in a vulnerable state. His heart hesitated, but as he looked into Sarah's eyes, he understood that the help he received was love in action. And that love may just be what jumped the greatest hurdle for him. After being discharged, George returned home. The quiet settled back into the walls like bitter shadows. The house felt even emptier, the silence sharper. Yet, right there in that solitude, he felt the strength building within him, and newfound courage from the kindness he received. Perhaps it was time to take charge of his relationships again, but this time in a different way. With every bite of Mrs. Henderson's cookies and sip of Tom's lemonade, ideas began to form. He could reach out to his children again, this time not in desperation but in strength. He flicked through his contacts, hesitating for a moment before sending them a heartfelt message, offering an invitation for a dinner, a space for reconnection. As he hit send, George felt a spark of hope. Would they accept? Would they show up? His heart raced at the thought. The doorbell chimed suddenly, a sound both jarring and welcoming. George rose slowly, the anticipation filling the air with a new kind of energy. Who could it be? Was it his children, coming to make amends? Or perhaps someone from the community? As the handle turned, he caught his breath, ready for whatever or whoever came next. The door opened slowly, revealing a familiar figure that sent a rush of conflicting emotions through George. Standing there was his daughter, Lily. Her eyes were wide, reflecting a mixture of surprise and apprehension, as if she hesitated to step into the threshold of his home. "Dad," her voice wavered, carrying more weight than a simple greeting. George's heart soared, then plummeted with uncertainty. He took a step forward, his arms instinctively reaching out to her. "Lily." But she remained still, her gaze darting around the room as if suddenly aware of all the stay-still reminders of time lost, the faded family photos, the dust clinging to the corners, the silence echoing louder than words could ever fill. I got your message," she stammered, edging inside but keeping a cautious distance. "I wasn't sure I could come." Every word she spoke hung heavy in the air. George felt a yearning echoing deep within him, a mix of hurt and hope battling for supremacy. "Why not?" "I thought you were too busy," he said, the sharpness of underlying disappointment slipping into his voice before he caught it. Lily flinched, the sting resonating off the walls. "I am busy, Dad. I never thought you wanted to see me again." The walls felt like they were closing in. "Of course I want to see you, I've missed you," he admitted, his voice softening with honesty. He didn't want to overwhelm her with his feelings, even though they bubbled up fiercely inside him. This isn't how I wanted things to be between us. Her gaze fell to the floor, and for a moment, they both were lost in the silence. George's heart ached at this connection that seemed to stretch further than just the space between them. He took a cautious step forward, trying to bridge that gap. I want to make things right. Can we talk? Finally, she looked up into his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through. I don't know where to start. Just then, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was a round-faced man, carrying a dish that smelled deliciously familiar. It was Marco from the neighborhood, holding a steaming casserole. Hey there. I thought I'd bring you something nice. George couldn't help but chuckle, the unexpected lightness of the moment easing some of the tension. Lily looked taken aback, surprised at how quickly the atmosphere shifted. Hi, Marco, George said with genuine gratitude. You have perfect timing. Glad to help, George. You know, everyone's been talking about you. We're just really glad you're back home, Marco said with an earnest smile. The words opened a small door in Lily's heart. She took a few cautious steps forward. I've missed this place too, she admitted softly, glancing around at the familiar, nostalgic corners of her childhood home. As Marco offered them each a plate, George felt the swell of hope rising again. It was still fragile, but it was there. Why don't we all settle down for dinner? We can talk about everything. The tension in the room felt different now as they filled their plates, exchanging small smiles and glances. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the beginning of a possible reconciliation, piece by piece, shared over food, laughter, or perhaps tears. Would they dive deeper? Could they mend the cracks that had grown between them? Just as George was about to take a breath of relief, his phone buzzed once more, igniting a mix of apprehension and anticipation. Could it be another connection waiting to unfold? Would his son finally reach out too? The weight of possibility hung thick in the air, vibrant and waiting. As the sound of George's phone buzzed, he felt a jolt of anxiety ripple through him. He glanced down at the screen, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread. The name flashing back at him was all too familiar: Ethan. Dad, is everything okay? Lily asked, her voice pulling him back from the edge of his thoughts. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. It's Ethan. The weight of the name hung thick in the air, casting a shadow over the moment they were trying to savor. Maybe it's good news? Lily suggested, her voice brightening even as uncertainty lingered in her eyes. Maybe, George replied, but the flicker of optimism sailing through her words felt like a breath of wind in a storm. He swiped to open the message, his pulse quickening as he read the short note that had just buzzed into his life. Can we talk? I need to see you. For a brief moment, he was lost in the rush of emotions that swirled around him. There was relief, confusion, and even a thread of fear. Just as hope began to rekindle, it cast a long shadow of questions. Was Ethan truly ready to face him? Or would it all crumble again, like everything so many years ago? Dad? Lily's gentle prodding cut through his thoughts. Sorry, he said, forcing himself to swallow down the mixture of anxiety coiling in his stomach. It's just I wasn't expecting to hear from him now. Lily studied him for a moment. What do you want to do? George felt trapped between past insecurities and present possibilities. I think I need to reply. Are you sure? He could see the concern etched on her face. She was standing there, taller and older than he remembered, yet in so many ways still his little girl. The bond between them, as fragile as it was being tested all at once. Yeah, he said, the decision crystallizing within him. This could be a chance to mend things with both of you. As he began typing, the room faded away, the weight of the moment pressing on him. Each tap of the screen echoed through his thoughts. When and where? He finally sent back. For a heartbeat, the anxious silence enveloped them, with Lily's eyes locked on his, equal parts curiosity and dread. Then the response came through almost immediately. I can come by in 30 minutes. George looked up at Lily. The worry in her expression mirrored his. What if this doesn't go well? Then we keep trying, he whispered, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. It felt like a truth worth holding on to. Okay, she said slowly, a small smile breaking through. I think we can do that. The sound of a familiar laughter drifted in from the kitchen as Marco began telling a story, completely unaware of the emotional whirlwind happening in the living room. Let us get through dinner first, George encouraged, but he knew the clock was ticking. Ethan would be there soon. As they settled into their meal, the initial warmth of the food combined with the tension of what lay ahead created a new kind of atmosphere like a storm before the calm. Moments passed, filled with light banter from Marco and half-hearted attempts at conversation between George and Lily. Soon, though, George's thoughts kept returning to Ethan. Would his son arrive filled with resentment? Would they even be able to talk, or would the old wounds bleed into today? In the chaos of conflicting emotions, Marco leaned in close, the friendly smile still painted on his face. You know, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the best outcomes. George hung on to those words as if they were a lifeline, gratitude swelling in his chest. Dinner wrapped up, leaving behind echoes of laughter intertwined with anticipation. The house felt charged, electric with the possibility of change. Just as George was wiping the last bit of sauce from his plate, the doorbell rang. Each ring resonated through the house like a countdown. He exchanged a glance with Lily, who suddenly seemed smaller, more fragile. George set his plate down with a shaking hand, and they both moved toward the door. When he opened it, he was met not just with his son, but with a reality he had long avoided. Would their reunion bring healing, or would it further unravel the threads binding their family? With both heart and breath held in suspense, he stepped aside to let Ethan in. Ethan stood at the doorway, the dim light from the hallway casting shadows on his face. It was hard to read his expression. Anger? Fear? Regret? George felt time slow down as they locked eyes, and all the years of silence swirled in that instant. Hey! Ethan's voice broke the tension, sounding almost like a question. George stepped back, opening the door wider, inviting him inside while his heart raced in his chest. Hey, come in, he managed to say, trying to sound casual, but his voice wavered. He watched Ethan shuffle in, hands shoved deep into his pockets, looking younger than he remembered, fragile like glass. Lily's here too, George said, glancing back to see her fidgeting near the kitchen. She watched Ethan with wide eyes, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. Hi, Ethan. Her voice was soft, like a gentle breeze that could crumble easily under the weight of their shared past. Hi, Lily, Ethan replied, his gaze flitting between father and daughter. There was an awkward silence, thick and heavy, each second stretching on, hanging in the air like a bitter promise. George swallowed hard, the lump in his throat tightening uncomfortably. Why don't we sit down? He suggested, gesturing toward the couch. Ethan nodded but didn't move. Maybe we should just talk? Ethan's voice was tentative, like a child testing the waters, unsure if they were too cold to splash. Sure, George said, feeling a bit of relief that Ethan wanted to talk. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to unfold. As they sat, George tried to read Ethan's expression. Could this be the moment they finally had needed? Or would it all just fall apart again? I got your message, Ethan started, looking down as if the ground held the answers to questions he couldn't voice. I wasn't sure if I should come. I didn't think I wanted to see you? George interjected softly. Ethan paused, his eyes darted up, meeting George's gaze head-on. I didn't think you would want to. After everything. It's been a long time, George admitted, the words spilling out heavier than he anticipated. Maybe we can figure this out together. Together, Ethan echoed, a hint of bitterness edging his tone. You mean like how we used to? Or how we should be? There it was, the weight of blame, thickening the air around them. George felt as if he were losing his grip on what they needed. Lily shifted in her seat, her anxiety palpable. Maybe we should share how we felt, she suggested, breaking the tension. Just be honest? Ethan stared at her, surprised. Then, his expression softened. I just wanted to yell at you both for leaving me, he said, his voice cracking open human emotions long forgotten. And then I realized, it hurt me to let go. Even more than seeing you both walk out of my life. George's heart sank, his mind racing with memories of that bitter separation. We thought you'd be better without us. It was wrong. Silence rippled between them, heavy but transforming. George's mind flicked back to times spent together, games played, laughter shared, and promises made. Can we try again? George whispered, clenching his fists, hoping. Ethan's eyes searched George's face, indecision flickering there. Can we? After everything? Lily leaned forward, her breath shaky yet steady. Those moments, they don't have to define us, do they? We can start fresh. George watched his son's defenses begin to crack, the walls he had built starting to crumble. The three of them, surrounded by hurt, could make something new from it. But what if one conversation didn't change everything? Just then, a sudden noise from the kitchen interrupted their moment, a loud crash followed by Marco's muffled apology. They all jumped, the atmosphere shifted. Guess today just doesn't want to go smoothly, George chuckled nervously. Ethan's lips quirked ever so slightly. Seems fitting for a family reunion, huh? Lily beamed at that, hurt intention momentarily forgotten. But as they all laughed, George felt the familiar pang of worry stab his chest. The long road ahead loomed large, unanswered and uncertain. Was this their chance to begin again, or simply another moment teetering on the brink of collapse? Let's just see how this unfolds, George thought, an array of emotions churning just beneath his calm facade. Just then, both Ethan and Lily turned to him, hope glimmering through their eyes. But would it last, or was this just the beginning of another roller coaster ride for their family? Ethan shifted in his seat, the laughter from moments ago dissolving like mist. The weight of what they had just discussed hung in the air, an unspoken truth waiting to be acknowledged. This wasn't just about rekindling old bonds, it was about healing wounds that had festered for too long. Can we really start fresh? Ethan finally asked, his voice fragile yet unwavering. It was a question that felt more like a plea, the sincerity of it reverberating in the quiet room. George nodded slowly, letting the hope of that possibility wash over him. I want to believe we can. His heart drummed in his chest as he watched Ethan wrestle with his emotions. He could see the flickering light of something, maybe trust, trying to spark between them. Lily leaned forward, eager. What if we start with small things? She suggested carefully. Like memories. We can share the good ones first. Just to remind us of what made us a family. Ethan looked at Lily, the softness in his eyes almost surprising. Yeah, okay. Like when we went camping that summer? Remember all the marshmallows we burned? A laugh escaped George's lips, the tension easing slightly. And the raccoon that tried to steal our food. I swear it was more stubborn than I was. Ethan chuckled, a genuine sound that sent warmth through the room. I remember Dad running after it, yelling sweet nothings as if that would stop it, he murmured, the memories drawing them closer, if only for a moment. Lily joined in, you ended up falling in the lake, remember? You were soaked all night. The laughter that bubbled up now felt different. It carried with it the hint of nostalgia, of happy times before pain clashed with love, before their world fractured irreparably. But as their smiles faded, the air around them thickened again. George's heart ached at the thought of how many more cherished moments they would need to rebuild to truly heal. The laughter felt like a fragile bridge over an abyss of unresolved hurt. Let us not take the easy road, George said, breaking the silence, his tone steady yet serious. We need to address the hard stuff. The pain, the anger, everything. If we really want to move forward, we have to face it all. Ethan's face fell a little, and the lightness slowly dimmed. I hated you both for leaving me, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. You may have thought you were protecting me, but it shattered me. I felt like I lost everything, my parents, my home. Each word felt like a stone, thrown with force into the water, causing ripples of regret and sorrow. I know, George whispered back, his heart aching at the weight of Ethan's honesty. And I wish I could take away that pain. I never wanted to hurt you. Ethan looked like he was fighting back tears. Then what do we do now? In that vulnerable moment, George realized they were standing on the edge of something much more significant, an opportunity to reshape their family narrative, to rewrite the story of loss and abandonment into one of reconciliation. Before George could respond, Marco stepped in, his cheerful voice cutting through the heavy air. Dinner is almost ready. I thought I heard laughter. Is everything okay? The shift in atmosphere was palpable, laughter trailing behind him like a phantom. George cracked a smile, his heart warm. Yeah, we're okay. Just working on some family stuff. Marco joined them with a casual grin, oblivious to the deeper conversation they were navigating. But George sensed the imbalance still lingering like a shadow. After a brief nod of reassurance from Ethan, they turned their focus to Marco, allowing a brief respite to breathe. Yet the undercurrents of emotion loomed, vast and uncharted. As they moved to the dining table, anticipation bubbled under the surface. Would they truly dive deeper into the complexities of their pain, or would the remaining walls rise again to separate them? With the aroma of dinner wafting through the air, a mixture of hope and uncertainty hung over them. Could they really navigate through the tough parts together, forging a new path, or were they bound to repeat the cycles of their past? The answer lay in the choices they would make, and George felt the familiar twinge of anxiety settle in. What if they couldn't break free from the pain that had held them captive for so long? And just then, something rustled outside, drawing George's attention away. It was a muffled whisper, something urgent that felt out of place. What was that? He asked, frowning, heart racing anew. Ethan turned his head sharply, eyes darting toward the window. I don't know. Should we check? This moment was shifting again, taking them into unknown territory. Emotions still raw, they hesitated, bracing for whatever was coming next as the night deepened around them. George's heart raced as he exchanged a quick glance with Ethan. They both felt it, that electric charge in the air, igniting their instincts. Something was out there. Lily, sensing the tension, whispered, "What if it's just an animal?" Or something worse, Ethan muttered, his voice tight. He didn't want to let fear take another hold on their fragile moment, but the unease was palpable. George shook his head, feeling an urge to protect them both, to confront whatever shadow lurked outside. "Let us just check," he said, the calmness in his tone sounding brave to his own ears. The three of them tiptoed toward the front door, the wood creaking beneath their weight as if echoing their rising uncertainty. George gripped the doorknob, hesitating for just a moment. What if whatever was out there was tied to their past, to the hurt that still loomed in every corner of their lives? "Ready?" he asked, glancing back at Ethan and Lily. Lily nodded firmly, though the anxiety was visible on her face. Ethan stood beside her, shoulders taut, ready to confront whatever lay beyond. When George flung the door open, the cold air hit them first. It felt almost alive, swirling with whispers that danced at the edges of their consciousness. The yard was dimly lit by the porch light, shadows twisting and curling like phantoms. And then they heard it again, a soft cry, echoing off the trees. Instinctively, they stepped outside, hearts pounding. "Hello?" George called out, voice cutting through the night like a beacon. "Is anyone out there?" Silence followed, heavy and thick. Just as they began to retreat, a figure slumped against the fence, small and shivering. George squinted, trying to make out the shape in the shadows. "Help please," a voice broke through the silence, trembling with desperation. It was a girl, no older than 12, her clothes tattered and dirt-smudged, a stark contrast to the innocence still clinging to her face. I got lost, and they left me," she stammered, tears glistening in her wide eyes that flashed with fear. Ethan gasped and took a step forward. "Where are your parents?" The girl shook her head, starting to cry. "I don't know. They said I was too much trouble." George felt his heart twist. The words shot like barbs. "You're not trouble," he assured her, moving closer. "You're safe now. We'll help you." As he crouched down to her level, he glanced back at Ethan and Lily, who stood frozen, shock plastered across their faces. This little girl, in her vulnerableness, was a reflection of their own struggles, the pain they were still battling. "Let us get her inside," George said, casting a determined look at his children. "We have to get her warm and figure this out." Lily stepped up, her maternal instinct kicking in. "I'll grab a blanket," she said and hurried into the house. George turned back to the girl, soothing tones spilling from his lips. "What's your name?" "Emma," she said, her voice a quiver as she wiped away the tears, but a flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. In this moment, hope intertwining with hurt felt almost palpable. They were embarking on something new, a chance to forge a new bond. Yet as they began guiding Emma toward the safety of their home, George wondered, was this unexpected arrival meant to teach them something? Could this little girl help them heal in ways they hadn't even anticipated? But before he could contemplate further, a loud crash echoed through the night, sending them all on edge. "What was that?" Ethan demanded, fear creeping back into his voice. George's heart dropped. They were on the edge of something significant, and now, darker forces seemed poised to strike again. What challenges awaited them in this unfamiliar territory? Would their chance at healing become intertwined with Emma's fate? George's breath hitched as the sound reverberated through the quiet night. It felt like a warning, a thunderclap that shattered the fragile moment of safety they had just created. "Stay close," he commanded, instinct kicking in. His eyes darted around, searching for the source of the noise. Ethan's grip tightened on Lily's shoulder, both children crowded around Emma, moving as a unit. She looked up at George with wide, terrified eyes. "Did you hear that?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Yeah," George replied, trying to keep his own voice steady. "Let us get Emma inside, hurry." He ushered them all back toward the house, the dread pooling in his stomach. What if whatever crashed was connected to Emma's plight? Was danger close? Inside, the safety of the four walls comforted them just a bit. They settled Emma onto the couch, where she wrapped her arms around herself, knees drawn to her chest. Lily returned, clutching a warm blanket. "Here you go," she said softly, draping it over Emma's frail shoulders. Emma looked up, her expression a mix of gratitude and confusion. "Thank you," she whispered, tucking the blanket tighter around her. George forced a smile, hoping it would mask the fear that lingered in the shadows of his heart. "You're going to be okay. We'll figure this out, I promise." The banging noise sounded again, this time more insistent. George felt his pulse quicken. "Did anyone see where that came from?" Ethan shook his head, his eyes wide, the glow from the porch light casting dramatic shadows on his face. "It's probably just the wind or something." But George could feel it in his bones, something wasn't right. "I'll check," he said, swallowing hard. "Stay here." "Dad, no." Lily protested, her eyes darting nervously. "We can't leave her alone." "I'll be quick," he promised, trying to calm her down. "I need to make sure it's safe." With one last look at the three of them, he stepped back out onto the porch. The cold air smacked against his face, sharpening his senses. He started scanning their yard, each shadow seeming to stretch into the night like dark fingers reaching out. That's when he noticed a figure half hidden behind the trees, a silhouette barely discernible in the gloaming. It shivered, but not from the cold. George's heart raced as he took a cautious step forward. "Who's there?" he demanded, voice firm but laced with a tinge of uncertainty. The figure lifted its head, and George caught the glint of eyes reflecting the light. George came a faint, broken voice, echoing from the shadows. Panic surged through him. It couldn't he be? Not now. Before he could think, George stepped closer. Who are you? He called, every instinct telling him to turn and run back inside, but even as those words left his mouth, he knew. The face that emerged from the darkness stirred something deep within, a twisted reminder of the storms they had faced. Did you really think you could leave me behind? The figure said, voice cracking like ice underfoot. George's heart sank. The dark figure stepped into the light, revealing the familiar frame he had tried to forget. I've come to collect what's mine. With dread wrapping its icy fingers around his throat, George faced a past that refused to stay buried. What had he brought back into their lives? Would he manage to protect Emma and his own family, this time? George's mind raced as he stared at the figure, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. It was almost surreal. The person standing before him should not exist in this moment. Why now? He found himself whispering, anger and confusion mixing in his voice. The figure stepped closer, still cloaked in shadows but unconfined by the darkness. Because you can't hide from the choices you've made, it said, voice dripping with contempt. George's throat tightened. Memories surged, old, painful, and raw. Choices that had once seemed so simple now loomed larger than life. Get away from here, he warned, the authority in his voice faltering. He couldn't let his family see this, couldn't let them feel the danger that was now palpable in the air. But the figure was unyielding, stepping fully into the dim light. Do you really think you can keep them safe? It taunted, an unsettling smirk creeping onto its face. Look around, George. You don't even know what you're up against. Suddenly, the world seemed to tilt. Emma's frail body on the couch, Lily and Ethan peeking around the doorframe, their faces pale with fear. Panic swept through George. He could feel every heartbeat echoing in his ears, a reminder that time was running short. Stay inside. He yelled, not looking back. Lock the doors. He turned back to the figure, now inches away, eyes mere shadows but laden with accusations. You've hurt them before. I'm not letting that happen again. Let us not act like you're the hero here, it hissed, voice low and dangerous. You may want to play the protector, but you know deep down that you can't truly shield them from reality. The words were like glass shards breaking the surface of an old wound. George shook his head, battling the rising tide of doubt. I can't change the past, he admitted, the truth tasting bitter on his tongue, but that doesn't mean I'll let you take anything from them, especially not now. With newfound resolve, he squared his shoulders. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he realized he was channeling the protector he desperately wanted to be. He would face this dark piece of his past head-on. The figure leaned closer, its breath hot and agitated. Is that so? You think you can fight what you've created? It raised a hand, and for a split second, George felt the urge to step back. But he clenched his fists instead. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the side of the house, jolting George from his thoughts. The figure turned, eyes narrowing, and he immediately seized the opportunity. Now! He shouted, pushing past the figure and racing back toward the door. Inside, he found Lily and Ethan standing frozen, horror stretching their small faces. Emma sat wide-eyed, clutching the blanket as if it were a shield. What's going on? Lily squeaked, fear quaking in her voice. I don't know yet, George admitted, breathless. But we must prepare. We can't let fear control us. Lightning flickered across the sky, momentarily flooding the room with light. In that flash, George caught a glimpse of trembling hands and anxious glances. Each of them was searching for reassurance, a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. Stay together, he insisted, covering the distance to them. I promise I'll protect you. Just don't lose hope. As the wind howled outside, he had no idea what had just crashed behind the house. But one thing gnawed at him, the darkness was no longer just a memory. It was real, and it was here. With conviction solidifying his resolve, George faced the shadows outside. He sensed a reckoning looming ahead. Could he hold them all together when the storm finally broke? As he clutched Lily's hand, ready to take a stand against whatever was coming. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were already standing on the edge of something they might not return from. What if this time, hope wasn't enough? The storm outside raged, but inside George harnessed the flickering flame of determination. He felt the warmth of Lily's hand in his, the familiar weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders. "We need to be ready for anything," he said, voice steady despite the chaos outside. Ethan moved closer, instincts shifting from confusion to caution. "What do we do?" he asked, eyes searching George's face for direction. "First, we secure the doors." George took a deep breath, grounded by the presence of his children. "Emma, can you help me move the couch? We need to barricade the front door." As Emma nodded, her young eyes reflecting a mix of fear and resolve, George felt a surge of pride. The storm had brought them together, and they were no longer just Dad and his kids, they were a team. Lily jumped in next to Emma, both of them pushing the couch toward the door with unexpected strength. The sound of wood scraping against the floor echoed warmly in contrast to the howling wind outside. "Good. Let us get those chairs, too," George urged, watching as his children rallied. This was the moment he had hoped for. They were finally working together. With every shove against the door, George felt the electricity in the room shift. Their fear was still there, palpable and heavy, but it became something they could fight against. "We've got each other," George reminded them, strength threading through his voice. Once the barricades were set, George turned back to face the children, feeling a new kind of calm settle over him. "We might be facing something unknown, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." Just as he spoke, that dark figure from outside slipped back into his mind, a reminder that wounds sometimes don't heal neatly. "I want you both to be honest," he said firmly. "If anything triggers your fear, speak up. We can't let the past control us." The wind howled again, and George scanned the darkened window, already trying to picture what was lurking outside. It felt like shadows were swirling, waiting to consume them. "What if it's you?" Ethan asked suddenly, voice breaking, like the spell of hope was thinning. "What if we can't protect Emma? What if we can't protect each other?" His brother's fear clanged against the walls of George's heart like a battle cry. The truth rang loud. Darkness had a way of creeping into even the brightest moments. But he wouldn't let doubt take hold right now. He'd come too far. "It's about what we do now," George said, urgency sharpening his focus. "That figure outside," he continued, chest tightening, "might be a representation of our past, the anger, the hurt. But that doesn't have to define us. We choose to fight." Emma peeked over the couch, eyes still shimmering with uncertainty, but they were joined by something else, curiosity, a flicker of hope. "What can we do?" she whispered. George knelt down, lowering himself to eye level. "We can show the world that family is stronger than fear. We can replace old pain with new memories. We can learn to forgive not just others but ourselves." His words hung in the air, a promise of urgency and brightness cutting through the storm once again. "Together, we can heal. We can be the family we were always meant to be," Lily added, stepping forward, her voice stronger than before. "That's right," George said, pride swelling as he watched Lily, full of energy, rekindle hope in Emma. It was hard to picture healing after so much damage, but if they took it piece by piece like building a puzzle, they could reshape their future. Power surged through them, uniting in the face of darkness. At that moment, George raised his chin, ready to face whatever surged outside. Their historical wounds had bled long enough. This was their moment, a pivot point, a chance to rewrite the story. Just then, a muffled thump broke through their resolve. Marco's figure emerged from the shadows on the porch, breathless with urgency, hands raised. "I heard the crash. Is everything okay?" George felt a mixture of relief and resolve surge through him. "Now it's even more important we stand together, a united front, as a family." Emma's small hand found Lily's, and Lily lightly squeezed it, forming a chain of support. Marco stepped over, joining the circle, eyes flickering with intent. "Everyone out there is rooting for you, George," Marco said, leaning in as the wind howled like a choir of spirits. You have more strength than you know, and your family is right behind you. Bolstered by Marco's reassurance, George felt electrified, ready to face everything they had endured. The shadows lurking outside no longer weighed heavily. They were opportunities to redefine themselves. Let us show them what we're made of, George declared, his heart beating with fervor. We can rewrite our stories together. As the wind reached a crescendo, every fiber of his being knew they were on the threshold of transformation. Together, the others echoed, a chorus of strength. The storm raged outside as they faced the shadows, resolve shimmering like a beacon in the cold night. This was their moment of strength, not just to endure but to emerge brighter, and no matter what came next, they would hold on to that light, a boundless truth that connected them all. Because family was not merely a word, it was a promise of steadfast love through every trial. George clenched his fists, ready. Let us go. Together, they stepped forward, united against whatever darkness awaited. Don't wait another second. Subscribe immediately to our channel if this story moved you. Hit that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach those who need this inspiration. Comment below how this emotional journey resonated with you, and share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You need to be part of our community. Your support makes all the difference. Let us stand strong together.